All right, so it is Friday, and I'm finishing up a series of videos about first principles or principles of practice. Today is the fourth, so Monday, you can go back and watch these videos, but Monday was the first where I really talked about the aspiration of practice. And if you remember, that was the intersection between the nature of self, the practices around impermanence, and understanding the relationship between self, the concretized, reified self, and the mystery. And the one way of looking at practice is the cultivation, stability, stabilization, exploration, gradual enhancement or enlargement of the intersection between those two first. The second was the necessity for a wise populace. And the second one and the fourth one today are kind of related because they both speak to the sense of a broader humanity. And so if first principle, cultivation of individual awareness, second principle, cultivation of communal, societal, humanistic awareness. The third principle, which we talked about on Wednesday, the third principle was the ongoing nature of revelation, and I meant that also in a couple of different ways. I meant that that this mystery is fully accessible today, in this moment, to all of us. It is a human, is an aspect of consciousness of the universe, and so it is fully within our grasp. And I meant that meaning everybody, no matter who you look at and to judge, criticize, dislike. I am not free from those biases and prejudices. There are people who I look at and disagree with to such an extent that I wonder whether they're capable of experiencing spiritual awakening. And the answer is that I am wrong. And that yes, they can. Maybe that's the plank in my eye and the mote in your eye, something like that, right? But that's the third principle. And then today is the flourishing. Flourishing. I think it can be summarized as flourishing. And what does that mean? It kind of ties everything together. Like, why do all of this? What is the reasoning behind this? It clearly resonates with the fourth noble truth, the end of suffering. Suffering is, my understanding, suffering is a poor translation of the Buddhist concept of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness of the unenlightened mind. I think it was Surya Das in one of his lectures or books that ended up with that translation of what we shorthand as suffering. But suffering implies that the universe and life is pain, right? That it's like having nails pounded into your head. And instead, suffering or that concept, this is the Buddhist concept, the unsatisfactory nature of the unenlightened life. I prefer to shift that and think instead of the outcome of the practice is the flourishing of the human spirit, my spirit, your spirit, and the universal spirit, the universalist idea of what? Of consciousness in the universe, I have a piece I wrote. I'm going to dig it up and maybe spend next week talking about this. Teeming with life, which can be read and has been criticized as an anti-evolutionary screed. And I don't know enough about evolution or about what I'm saying to know whether that's true, but if we start at the very beginning of space and time with the Big Bang, and I'm quite happy to frame that in a ecstatic moment of religious creation as well. I have no illusions about how little we know about that, but let's say there was a moment where things began. And by things, I mean time as well. Time not being a blank canvas against which everything happens. Boy, I have a tendency towards tangents, but today I'm really tangential. But I'm trying to create some context for flourishing. Right? So we start with this hot second of the Big Bang, or this moment of divine creation, this first impulse. And in that moment, our understanding of physics and chemistry and of solutions to the problems of consciousness aren't relevant because everything is simply an instant, a simultaneity. We begin with a simultaneity, but within a very, very short period of time, a fraction of a microsecond or a quintillionth or whatever the smallest measurement is, the Planck constant, right? Within that moment, the universe has expanded. The creation has expanded. Time has expanded. And the process of cooling and precipitation has begun. And so it cools enough that subatomic particles can materialize, precipitate, right? And from that, from atoms, molecules. Now we're some seconds in, and we start to have the presence of the constituent building blocks of reality. Because whatever else reality is, it is made up of stuff, right? Things, bits. And whatever the behavior of those bits and whatever the provenance of those bits, there are bits. So I'm associating from the very first moment of creation, the instantiation of the simultaneity, the moment when God passes over the waters and utters the word. I don't know any other creation moments. Things are cooling and precipitating. Molecules become substances. Creatures, plants, right? Maybe this is where the anti-evolution charge is valid. My teleology, well, I'm throwing some words around here, but my teleology is a sense of omnipresent consciousness that is precipitating from that first moment. And creatures, including humans, are a further precipitant, right? In order for a human to be constructed, there's a certain level of stability, which I'm associating with a certain level of cooling. And along with it, we maintain the seed of consciousness, the seed of that initial connection. Consciousness then is ever present, but maybe there's pooling of awareness. I'm thinking here of a tidal basin as the ocean rushes in, and then as the tide recedes, there are pools left over that are entirely part of the ocean, but appear to be isolated. But they aren't isolated. They're simply congealed or consolidated or temporarily constricted. So the notion of consciousness, the talking about it carries with it a definition or a sense of constriction. But we should never lose sight of the fact that if we were to crawl up and out of our tidal pool, we would return to the ocean. And then within that tidal pool, we have things like microphones and coffee cups and YouTube and Bibles and the Buddhist sutras and Emerson essays and tarot cards and everything you can see spread around you here that are part of the tools that I use to kind of stabilize the current moment. All right. Now, flourishing is the degree to which we are all commingled, or the degree to which we are all equally available to that sense of initial commingling. Because everything else comes from that. Everything else is precipitant from that. And I include our culture and our society and our politics. So as a natural outcome, as a natural condition of this flourishing, things like a society that takes care of everyone, the sick, the hungry, the homeless, the ill at ease, the unstable, the angry, the violent. All of these are conditions that can be not just addressed or mitigated, but kind of become no longer relevant if our understanding of being is based on flourishing, and if the idea of flourishing is simply a recognition that we are precipitants, we are precipitated from a foundational experience of consciousness. And I hope that in the last 12 minutes as I've been speaking, I can make that statement and not have it sound like bullshit. So let me wrap up from there. If you have questions, comments, please drop a note. This has been a good week. I've enjoyed going through these 4 principles. I worked on articulating these starting with the new year. And so I've been looking forward to making these videos and sharing them. But it's a starting point. They help me define my practice and my aspirations, but I'm wondering if they resonate at all with any of you, and or if they anti-resonate, whatever the opposite of, if they deaden your spirit. That would be terrible. But either way, let me know, and I would love to continue the dialogue. I do like getting the notes. I get a few, and I love all of them. So thank you. Oop, how am I doing this? There we go. Keep your wits about you.